Greetings, hypervisors, now that you know what that means. I guess this should probably be a part 2 to the hypervisor sort of topic. I only briefly sort of went into what your hypervisor should do, especially I want to talk about the general purpose generic hypervisor, the one that kicks in situations that you didn't specifically plan for in this video. I want to talk about sort of when you find yourself in an argument, and this could be with any human. And honestly, this is another one of those lessons that is perfectly applicable to almost all of your human interactions that are contentious, but with your kids as well. The hypervisor that you should that you should install looks for moments of sort of extreme emotion or outburst or things that really trigger you and cause you to react outward in a way that would be bad. You just make the hypervisor look for that, the system hook to look for that moment. And when it sees that moment, it needs to send you into a mode that you have designed for yourself to make you more sort of in control, more of an agent over yourself rather than a slave to your inner emotional beast, let's say. So, I want to talk you through some basic tools that you need to work on and design and imagine and work through and put in place and meditate on so that it's there and that code is written when it gets triggered, it can run and really do a good job for you. And it's really, really simple stuff. And you could even call this video like how to handle oneself in an argument. It's like a fight or something like that. When you're triggered or, when something happens that causes strong emotions that might lead you to react in a way you would regret, is another way of saying it. The first, there are things where our behaviors form feedback loops with our emotions, the part of our brain that sort of upregulates or downregulates overall agitation or excitement or emotion. And so a lot of this is going to be about controlling your physical self so that you can block the feedback loop that would escalate your emotions or your excitement. If you get emotionally triggered by something and you then respond by standing up, by shaking, by waving your hands, by yelling, by projecting and pointing and fighting, all of those actions feed back into your brain and increase your level of anxiety, excitement, emotional, like your fight or flight, your adrenaline. Then the adrenaline then feeds right back in, and now you're screeching even louder and, escalating is what I'm saying. It's a loop. And this hypervisor's job is to put a breakpoint in that loop where right at the point of controlling your sort of physical body. And this is something you can absolutely train yourself to do. And this is what I'm promoting. This is what I'm trying to teach you to do. There are certain rules that this hypervisor should put down as sort of like an absolute governor. Now, when I say governor, I'm using it in the context of like a governor on a car, like an RPM governor. And what that means is like when there's a maximum limit to the RPM on your engine. Like your engine it'll rev up and it'll rev up and then it'll hit the upper limit. And then there's a mechanism in place that prevents you from applying more acceleration that would knock that needle any higher over that limit. And that is what we're talking about here. We're going to put sort of a governor on our physical actions in the world that is triggered by this hypervisor in these situations. The first limit that I want to talk about, and this serves as a red flag and a point for you to examine later if it doesn't happen, is raising your voice. And I don't mean like talk seriously or project yourself or like if there's somebody's running the vacuum and you need to sort of yell so somebody can hear you. That's not what I'm talking about. But I mean like talking down to people, yelling at people, raising your voice. Not only is this a red flag that you are not in control, you're not in the pilot seat anymore, but one of, some damaged part of you has become triggered and is in the pilot seat. And that's something that you should examine later, especially when you see it on the recording that we talked about in a previous video, where you're recording yourself when you're in these situations. But you should be training yourself to do the opposite. Not only because it helps whatever conflict you're in to not be yelling, because yelling escalates the conflict and usually makes things worse. But it also puts that first physical break point in that feedback loop that goes straight back into your nervous system that continues escalating adrenaline and just the feedback loop that makes everything worse and makes it harder to control and puts you less in control of yourself. Do not yell. Do not raise your voice. Now, this requires practice and training and self-control. But really, the easiest way that I've found to implement it is making the realization, and I keep talking about sort of the time crunch of these situations. A lot of times we feel like we have to respond immediately and we have to achieve a resolution right then in that conversation in that moment. And that person just said this, that, and the other to me. And so I gotta clap back with some pithy response that, puts them in their place. Almost never is that something that is actually true. When somebody says something to you, they're providing an input for you to decide what to do about it. And this interrupt, this hypervisor that I'm describing, allows you to take yourself, to hover above yourself and to realize, oh, that is an input. They just said some really nasty stuff, at me. And now, rather than me, letting that just sink straight into my emotions and responding, by yelling something harmful back at them, I'm going to realize that they said that because they're feeling that, because they desire this, but they're achieving that or not achieving that. And I'm going to, here it is, slow down. You are going to slow down. When you are triggered and your hypervisor kicks in, the first thing it should do is make you stop and wait a second, or a minute, or 5 minutes if you need 5 minutes. Slows you down. They are giving you inputs, your hypervisor kicks in. Take a deep breath. There's nothing that says you have to respond immediately or in the next 10 seconds, and there's nothing there that makes it have to be an immediate thing most of the time, unless it's an actual physical confrontation, which is not what we're talking about here. Just taking a minute. Take a deep breath. Wait a second. Give your brain time to process the situation, to realize what's going on. Take the time. I know it might feel awkward in the moment, and it doesn't matter. Trust me, this is helpful. Take the time that you need to take a deep breath and then go down the list of people involved in the situation. What are they wanting? What is their desire? What are they trying to achieve? What is causing them to behave in the way that is triggering for you? What is your desire in the situation? What are you feeling? What do you think they're feeling? Actually feeling, not just and I'm saying analyze this as an objective outside observer. Analyze yourself, analyze them, take the time. I don't care if it takes 2 minutes and you have to tell them, hey, hold on a second. I'm trying to process the conversation that we're having. Just give me a second. Something like that. If you need to think through it, take deep breaths, analyze everything. And then you can then continue the conversation in a calm, controlled manner. And you can take conscious control of the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice, your body language, all of this stuff can, if you just stop and slow down and wait, you can put yourself back in the pilot seat. Again, so you control the volume of your voice, you control how animated you are. A lot of times if we're moving around or waving our arms and stuff like this is part of that feedback loop. Control your body. Hold still and calm. Keep your voice. Teach yourself this thing. It doesn't mean that you have to sort of Spock your emotions into oblivion, but it means that, look, I understand we're having a difficult conversation, but I'm going to maintain control over this body and this brain. And so I'm going to talk in a calm, direct, clear manner. I'm not going to freak out and wave and pace around and whatever. I'm going to stay in control. I'm going to take conscious control of my breathing, because the breathing cycle also feeds back into your emotions in these situations. Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that it's really important that you get this, and you're feeling, I can tell you're feeling really angry. And you can probably tell that I'm feeling, kind of frustrated and upset. And I really want us to work this out. I want you to be happy. I want you to have what you want, because that makes me happy. And I assume that you want the same for me. That's kind of the moment you need to take. Just slow it down. Take control of yourself, because if you don't, then your inner programming, your childhood damage, your triggers, your emotions, your lizard brain, something's going to be in control if you're not. And you should want it to be you, especially when we're dealing with our children. Let's not forget, this is the parenting university, even though we're talking about something that will help you for everyone. Never, ever name call. That should be another hard rule for your hypervisor. If you're approaching the point where you're that emotional and you're ready to call names, then that's a significant problem. Obviously, this would not happen with your children. Do the same thing that you do with your kids when your kids are distraught. This can sometimes help too. After you're calm, try reflecting back to them what you think they're feeling, and try and empathize with that. Wow, I mean, I can really tell that you're upset right now. You care very strongly about this. You're very angry. I can see your frustration. I got that. Man, I understand. Just saying that can drastically help these situations. Just acknowledging the other person's emotional state can make a huge difference. Describe how they're feeling, then describe how you're feeling. In an honest, genuine, non-passive aggressive, attacky sort of way. Yeah, I'm feeling sad right now. I'm feeling, kind of frustrated, and I'm feeling kind of futile right now. Obviously, if you're talking to your kids, it's going to be different. You're not going to use these same concepts. It'll probably be more simple stuff like mad or sad or, things like that. Frustrated. Another important thing to say, especially to adults, is this happens often. You can say something like, "I feel like you don't really understand my position, or you don't really understand how I'm feeling right now." And can I just take a moment? Ask this question. Can I just take a moment to sort of tell you how I'm feeling, and just so that I can make sure that you know how I'm feeling? Just a question like that can be very helpful and powerful. Again, with another adult. Also, in any relationship you have, parents, kids, friends, whatever, if you are struggling to have this hypervisor take control in these triggered situations, in these emotional, difficult situations, for whatever reason, maybe you weren't prepared in some way that you feel like you needed to be prepared to keep you in the pilot seat. You need to have sort of a standing agreement with people that you can request a break. You can request a timeout, to where you can go into separate rooms if needed to decompress and to get yourself back in control, and to give yourself the time to do all the stuff that I was just talking about doing in the moment. Like if it's too much or too severe or too emotional, you might not be able to slow yourself down enough to do this sort of empathetic analysis of all the people involved in the moment. Sometimes it's just going to be like that. So you need to have a standing foundational rule in your relationships with people that, look, I need a timeout on this. I'm not trying to dismiss the conversation. I want us to continue this. I just want to think through it a little bit so that I can make sure that I'm able to empathize with you, as well as clearly communicate my emotions, let's say, things like that. I guess this episode turned out to be more for handling yourself with other adults. But, you know, if you can do this with other adults, you can generally do this with kids probably much easier. So with kids, it's going to be stuff like, oh, they broke something that was really important to you. And, you know, you're feeling all of a sudden this, you know, severe anger, and your hypervisor needs to kick in. And you take your breaths and you take the time that you need to control your volume of your voice and to control your anger and to make sure that your frontal lobe is in the pilot seat and not the anger that was triggered by the damaged or broken object. Take the time to realize that, oh, they're a child and they didn't mean to, and you chose to have children, and part of having children is they're going to break some of your stuff. You know, just take the time to slow down and make sure that your conscious, sentient, beautiful adult frontal lobe is in the pilot seat instead of whatever else is there. All right, I think I've rambled long enough on this topic, but if I missed something, or you have a suggestion or a personal experience for your own hypervisor situations where this helped, or you wished it could have helped, let me know, and maybe we can certainly do follow-up videos. Make sure you've watched the video about recording yourself too, because that's a big training tool for you to use when you fail in these situations. When you finish an interaction that became an argument and you look back on it and you realize that you're not proud of how you handled that, or man, that did not go well. How did that go wrong? I need to do better. I need to figure out myself so that that doesn't happen again. Well, listening to the recording of what happened will give you a pretty clear picture of yourself and how you reacted and how you sounded to the other person, even though you didn't think you sounded like that. Anyway, well, you can watch that video. Thanks, guys.